this workshop is over breaking the cycle, understanding codependency and mental health. My name is Serenity, and I am codependent.
Hi, Serenity.
So first, a little backstory of my life before CoDA. So in spring of 2019 was when I first had my big mental downfall and a serious struggle with suicidal ideation, and that's when I got into therapy for the first time. Fast forward to spring of 2021, I started hitting another decline. I finally, I had some childhood traumas surface, and it caused a rather steep decline, and in the summer was my second big downfall mentally, and I had my first attempt to end my life. At that point, I wasn't hospitalized because I didn't admit to my attempt, but at the time I was the only one that actually knew that it happened. In the fall of 2021, I had my first psychiatric hospitalization. I again had become suicidal, but this time I reached out before I attempted and got the help that I needed. Between fall of 2021 and spring of 2023, I had repetitive hospital visits between psychiatric inpatient and residential trauma treatment. I had a total of 9 different hospital and treatment stays in less than 2 years, as well as 7 different suicide attempts. And then fast forward into spring of 2023 was when I was introduced into this idea of codependency. Beforehand, didn't even really know what it was, never even heard of the word before. And that's when April of 2023 is when I started my CoDA journey. So let's get into it. So what is codependency? Codependency is an excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner, typically one who requires support on account of an illness or an addiction. Mental health is a person's condition with regard to their psychological and emotional well-being. So before we go any further, the packet that you received, if you do not have some, there are some at this front table. The very first page on it is 2 squares. So the idea behind this workshop is we're going to figure out how the 2 intertwine. But sometimes, before you can figure out how they intertwine, you need to be able to differentiate what each one is. So as we go through it, you can use 1 square for your codependency and 1 square for your mental health. And then in the end, we're going to learn how they intertwine. So as we go through the different, we'll start with the codependency side. You can write your different things for that. So what is codependency? Codependency is not recognized as a mental health disorder by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, otherwise known as the DSM-5. That is where you receive a lot of your diagnoses from mental health professionals. Instead, it is considered a relational pattern of maladaptive coping strategy that can arise from specific situations or environments. Codependency is not just romance. It does not just include romantic relationships. A codependent individual might place a family member needs above their own, often struggling to maintain healthy boundaries. An employee might feel excessively responsible for a coworker's success or well-being, often at the expense of their own needs. One person may constantly seek validation from a friend, relying on them for emotional stability and self-esteem. And caregivers may become overly invested in those they care for, neglecting their own self-care in the process. And also, if you continue looking past, I printed out the notes for you, so you don't have to worry about taking pictures of the slides or scrambling to write things down very quickly.
Thank you. Not all heroes were thoughts.
All right. Codependent relationships frequently are typically rooted in early life experiences, as in our foundational documents, rooted in dysfunctional families and enduring trauma. They may be associated with challenges like substance abuse, relationship addiction, or trauma. They occur alongside conditions like anxiety, depression, or personality disorders. They involve enabling harmful behaviors, and they affect an individual's mental well-being. Some common behaviors, which you might recognize some of them from different patterns that we go through, but some common behaviors of codependency are spending all of your time with or focused on others, an overwhelming fear of being abandoned, being unable to think about life without the other person, being unable to believe or accept that someone loves you, having your partner or one person as your only close relationship, a need for constant reassurance, making excuses for each other, giving up what matters to you or makes you happy, an inability to remember how to be alone, tolerating harmful behavior, people-pleasing, that's my favorite, obsession with a partner, excusing bad or abusive behavior, feeling like you need to change but can't, and not knowing who you are without them. Who relates to at least 5 of those? Does anybody want to share which ones they relate to? Or if you have one that's not on the sheet. Go ahead.
Desiree, codependent. Mine actually started even in the room of obsession with a partner. So, it's a big one.
Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead.
The one that I have that's not on there.
Go ahead.
Is the want to be always right and tell unsolicited advice, telling other people what to do.
Yes.
That's my problem.
That's a good one. Anybody else? Go ahead.
A need for constant reassurance. I'm always asking them, are you okay? And there's anything wrong. Like my kid is like, yes, mom, I'm fine. He's 8, so he's like, why are you asking me? You know, like, yeah, it's a constant need to be reassured that everything and everyone's okay.
Or even being reassured that you're doing your job right.
Yeah.
I just started a fairly new career. I switched careers and now I work with children with autism. And I am only a couple of months in the field. I've worked in mental health and worked in healthcare and childcare. But this specifically, I sit there every single day questioning if I'm doing my job right. I deal with kids that are engaging in challenging behaviors, and I sit there talking to my supervisor every single day. Are you sure I'm doing it right? Because I'm getting beat up every single day. I'm not getting work done. Please tell me I'm doing it right. So not only is it making sure that people are okay, but it's also making sure that you're doing okay and you're doing right. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Or being unable to believe or accept that someone loves you. I've been conditioned that love is conditional. And so when someone gives it to me just unconditionally, I don't believe it. I always feel like there's a catch.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, mine's a little different.
Okay.
I'm codependent, but what I did is I became anti-dependent. I don't need nobody to know how. You know, I don't get close to anybody. I don't get intimate with anybody. I'm all, I go off with this cabin in the woods. I don't listen on it.
So hyper-independent.
Yes, and that's a reaction against the codependency.
I saw one over here.
I was going to say almost the same thing after many, many decades of extreme codependency, being in abusive marriages and everything else. I feel like I can't trust anymore, so it's been like 11 years and still I'm by myself, and it's actually okay that way, but
Anybody else? Go ahead, in the back.
Denying my wants and needs.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah, denying the wants and needs. Oh, I see another
Like
one.
on people pleasing.
People
And
pleasing.
then getting frustrated or angry. Actually.
Saw your hand back there?
Being hypervigilant is really draining.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to remember how to be alone. It's actually difficult to be alone.
Yes. I had to adjust from always living with somebody. I lived by myself for only 7 months, and it about drove me crazy. I didn't know how to be in my own space. Even though I tend to isolate because of mental health, it's kind of different whenever you're isolated not by choice, because there's not even availability for somebody else to be there. So it's a big adjustment. All right, so let's transition. What is mental health? Mental health is the state of a person's emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It influences how people think, feel, and act, affecting their ability to handle stress, build relationships, and make decisions. Maintaining good mental health is crucial for overall well-being throughout life. So some common mental health conditions I'm sure most of you have heard of are anxiety disorders, which can cause restlessness, panic attacks, and irrational fears. There's depression. It's very common. It involves sadness, low energy, and changes in sleep. There's the bipolar disorders, which has multiple categories of that. Include manic episodes, depressive episodes. There's eating disorders, which are distorted body image, restrictive eating, and overeating. And there is also alcohol and substance disorders, which include binge drinking, isolation, and unmanageability. As I was preparing for this, and even in my education and knowledge behind it, I find it interesting that substance disorders are classified in the DSM-5, yet codependency is not. Fun fact. I actually struggle with every single one of these. I am diagnosed for 3 of them, and the other 2 undiagnosed but working through them. I myself am diagnosed with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and bipolar. But I also struggle with eating disorder, and I am currently in recovery for alcohol. I am almost 2 months sober. So, relationship challenges with mental health. It can all around affect your relationships. So first is the communication. So you can have difficulty expressing emotions, which can lead to misunderstandings that strain the relationship, causing both partners to feel isolated and disconnected over time. There's conflict. Mental health challenges can contribute to more frequent or intense arguments, heightening tensions within the relationship. Trust. Mental health challenges can contribute to more frequent or intense arguments. That's duplicated.
It's all right.
Typo.
Trust.
Yeah. Trust issues. Social isolation. Mental health difficulties can result in social withdrawal, affecting a person's ability to communicate and engage with others, including their partner. Emotional turmoil. Mental illness can cause emotional instability in both partners, leading to a roller coaster of feelings that can strain their connection. And our favorite, codependency. Mental health struggles can foster codependent dynamics or even lead to feelings of resentment between partners, complicating the relationship further. Anybody deal with any of those? Yeah, everybody. I mean, everybody follows under this one. So everybody's hand should be up. Anybody want to share on a specific one? Be vulnerable? How you see it in your relationships? Go ahead.
Struggle with communication with my son's mother on a regular basis, which ends up being, difficult expressing my emotions and stuff like that. So we always end up clashing with miscommunications that could have easily resolved had I communicated clearer or said exactly what I was thinking or what's my need.
Yep. Go ahead. See.
The social isolation, I was kind of taught at a younger age, like isolation was a good thing for like success or something, but it just kind of allowed me to put up all these invisible walls. It's like, you gotta break it down.
Before recovery, I didn't have the best choice in men, so they weren't trusting, and one was abusive, so it made me more controlling, and so it's hard to build trust with the next person, carrying the PTSD and the codependency and not having recovery. So trust from past situations just came into these situations, basically.
Yeah, that's a big one. Anybody else?
Now, one of the fairly common problems that a lot of cases of codependency, at some point we can become objects of codependency ourselves. It goes beyond this feeling of not good enough and fear. It's actually some kind of self-hatred, which I believe is probably based on anger towards people that are abusive or abandoning, and which is dangerous to express what you feel. So it gets turned inward on yourself. You get beat up on yourself. You try yourself to do good. So being an object of connect to yourself is good.
Saw another hand back there.
I was just
Oh.
relating very much to what you just said.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think because I'm diagnosed much like yourself with what she needs, and the only one is not is an eating disorder. That's just because I like food. No. And the alcohol and substance abuse for me was a huge one. I also picked men because I guess my codependency. I wanted to fix the guys. I fell in love with potential, and I didn't realize how much of that, it just goes hand in hand. Like what came first, codependency or the addiction? Because I'm not sure. And so when I found codependency, I'm just like, oh, well, that's what it is. Had I known what codependency was, I think at an earlier age, maybe it wouldn't have developed into like my codependency on alcohol and drugs, which is now mental illness, So it's like the chicken or the egg for me at this point. Sorry, my thoughts are racing. So.
No, you're good.
But yeah.
You're good. Thank you for being vulnerable. Anybody else?
I just want to say
Yeah.
that I am so grateful to see young people here. I spent 40 years of my life in relationships that were terrible for me because of codependency, because I sought attention, because I wanted to fix somebody I thought I had the power. And it wasn't until recently that I got clarity on what it really was. And I'm so happy to see young people in this program. So,
Thank you. Common behaviors of mental health. All right. Feeling sad or down, confused thinking or reduced ability to concentrate, excessive fears or worries, or extreme feelings of guilt, extreme mood changes of highs and lows, withdrawal from friends and activities, significant tiredness, low energy, or problem sleeping, sex drive changes, detachment from reality, other known as delusions, paranoia, or hallucinations, inability to cope with daily problems or stress, trouble understanding and relating to situations and to people, problems with alcohol or drug use, major changes in eating habits, excessive anger, hostility, or violence, and suicidal thinking. Anybody relate to any of those? Yeah? Anybody want to share on them? Go ahead.
After I had my first daughter, I had pretty severe postpartum depression and anxiety, and that looked like irritability and anger. So I just thought I was a really horrible mom for feeling those things, but really I was just really depressed and anxious.
Yeah. Anybody else?
My name is Kathleen. I'm grateful for a minute. Becoming an alcoholic helped me, or finding out I was an alcoholic, I should say, helped me to see how much I needed CoDA. That was just a symptom of all these other things. The trauma from my childhood, in my 20s, after having 3 wonderful children and a good husband, I would fantasize about committing suicide in the night. And I just thought they would be better off without me. And I didn't carry it out then because I didn't want my kids to find me. Thank God I had at least that much. But later on, I did make 2 attempts, and by the grace of God, it was not successful. So I was very, very, even though my dad gave me the book, Codependency, no more, many years ago, I guess I wasn't ready for it until I had some alcoholic sobriety, several years, and then I was ready to look at the deeper issues and all those. It's just check. So thank you so much for breaking it down, because that confused thinking or reduced ability to concentrate, that's one of the worst. So it's hard to, it's like trying to nail Jello to a tree. I can't fix what's wrong with the same brain that got me here.
Mhm.
So thank you.
Yeah, no, and I also am diagnosed ADHD, so that also that also adds to the inability to concentrate. And that kind of just exaggerates that excessive fear and worry sometimes, or the extreme feelings of guilt. Bless you. So yeah, anybody else? Yeah.
It was hard in the pause earlier, because trouble understanding relating to people, because after narcissistic abuse, I think I was just so controlling over my environment and taking care of myself. It was hard for me to have empathy or understand other people, because I'm just trying to protect myself and get through PTSD. So it's kind of hard in pause. The understanding part is something definitely I'm working on. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Very good.
Eric?
In May this year, after 34 years of marriage, I asked my wife for a divorce. And the first thing that hit me was, how am I ever going to be single without somebody again? It was so strong that I made my plan. And I haven't told anybody this before. I sat with a gun thinking I'm going to be married to somebody that I don't like, or I'm going to be nothing. And I did just a little text message to one of my program friends, and he came over and took care of me and everything. This is, this is some serious stuff. And it'll kill you just as quick as alcoholism or drug addiction. And it almost took me, and I'm grateful for this. You guys.
Thank you so much.
Good.
Anyways, I think the fact that one of the things that I dealt with was domestic violence in my relationship and always the excuses for it. And that in itself can kill you. There's been plenty of women that have died it's not just, I don't like to say women are the only ones being beat up, because I know it works both ways. So, rephrase that. But I think domestic violence is definitely another factor of tolerating that kind of thing. And that's really scary, because some people don't know how to get out of that.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, so how does it all intertwine? So if you have your packet, you had the 2 squares in the front. Your very last page should be a Venn diagram. So this is where we're going to tie it all together. What? All right, so codependency and mental health are closely linked, as codependency often leads to emotional challenges that impact overall well-being. And here's how they relate. The first is emotional dependence. Codependency often involves an excessive reliance on another person for emotional support and validation, typically at the expense of one's own needs. And the impact on mental health is that the dynamic can cause anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, as the codependent person may feel their worth is tied to the approval of well-being and the other person. Neglecting self-care. In codependent relationships, people often prioritize others' needs over their own, leading to the neglect of self-care. The impact on mental health is that this neglect can lead to burnout, chronic stress, and deteriorating physical and mental health because of personal boundaries are blurred or non-existent. I am one that is very bad on neglecting the self-care. And I have actually ended up in the hospital for physical health reasons because of it. I am one that will throw myself into work, overwork myself, not give myself a break at home, and resulting in 2 ER trips in 1 week. And the doctor not be able to tell me what's wrong because it's not anything really physical. It's because I wasn't taking care of my body. I wasn't sick. I seemed sick, but I wasn't. It was because I was neglecting my self-care. Anybody else relate to either of these two? You want to share?
Yeah, I can share. My name is Sunny, and I struggle with codependency.
I couldn't.
One of the things for me which led to a mental breakdown was neglecting self-care. It was overworking myself, taking on too much responsibility, taking on too many emotions, caring about how people thought of me, being overwhelmed with various, messages or various triggers that came in, and that eventually led down to burnout and a mental health crisis.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, fear of abandonment. A core feature of codependency is a deep fear of being abandoned or rejected, which drives the unhealthy relationship behaviors. The impact on mental health is that this fear can create intense anxiety and insecurity, leading to obsessive thinking or people-pleasing tendencies that reinforce the cycle of codependency. Difficulty setting boundaries. Codependent individuals struggle to set boundaries, often feeling guilty when they try to assert their needs or say no. The impact on mental health is a lack of boundaries contributes to feelings of being overwhelmed, stressed, or even resentment, which can fuel mental health issues like depression or anger. Who relates to those two? Anybody want to share on that? I know I'm asking y'all to be vulnerable. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the cycle of my life. I guess that's I kind of put it into words. It's like it's what I've been doing all along. I lost my father when I was 8, and it was in a really weird like he's not dead, and I say I lost him because he just never like came back due to an illness that I was too young to understand. And so that like took me away from that. You know, my father technically abandoned me, and my mom, because she had to be mom and dad, worked full time all the time. So that was I was too young to understand that she had to make money for us to survive, right? So that was another form of abandonment. And so as I grew up, I keep feeling this sense of abandonment. And because of it, in my relationships, I give and I give. Even when I'm not asked to, I give all of me in every way so that I won't be abandoned, which is, of course, leads to everything like here, you know, the people-pleasing tendencies, the anxiety and the insecurity. And then, of course, it leads right to the setting boundaries. You know, what are boundaries? I didn't know what boundaries were until recovery, you know, until I realized, okay, it's okay to say no. It's okay to not give all of me because there's no more to give. So,
So I definitely am recognizing now that I'm putting up boundaries. The people that have been so used to me all my life of not having these boundaries are having a very difficult time handling them. And that's been kind of difficult for me because that includes my kids, my ex-husband, like all these people, my mom, and it's causing other issues. So, but I'm being okay with that right now. But it is difficult to keep those boundaries and stay firm because these people aren't used to it, and now all of a sudden your daughter's not talking to you because she can't talk down to you anymore. You're divorcing your husband because he refuses to respect your boundaries. All this stuff happens, and I mean I know it's part of the healing process, but it's been a little disheartening and it's been hard. So I definitely think that is one of the biggest red flags of codependency, right? Is we let people just hold themselves.
Yeah. I know for me personally, I've been one that doesn't really set boundaries in the past, and here recently I found it really taking a toll and it intertwining with that mental health. I was struggling with the piece of the people pleasing and basically allowing an individual to run over me financially, and I just kept giving and giving and giving, and when things should have been covered and timelines weren't met, but I lacked that boundary. I didn't stick to it. I was not very firm on it, but I have, through CoDA and through therapy, have been able to set the boundary, and that situation is now resolved, and my mental health is finally starting to hit an incline. Yeah. The next one, low self-worth. Codependent individuals often have a poor self-image and derive their self-worth from others, making them vulnerable to emotional distress when relationships become strained. The impact on mental health is low self-worth can perpetuate negative thinking patterns, making it harder to break free from toxic relationships, and often leads to mental health issues such as depression and anxiety. Control and perfectionism. In codependent relationships, individuals may try to control others' behaviors to maintain stability in the relationship, often through over-caretaking or perfectionism. The impact on mental health is the need for control creates stress, frustration, and a constant fear of failure, which can worsen mental health issues like obsessive-compulsive tendencies or general anxiety. Does anybody struggle with those too? Yeah. Anybody want to share on that? Go ahead.
I took care of my mom for the majority of my life, and it was a very toxic, codependent relationship. And the control was the over caretaking. I mean, all of those, I had no boundary, and so I revolved my life around her. And I kept telling myself, maybe the day that she passes it'll end, but in reality, actually got worse. Because then I had this codependency and I wanted to give it to somebody, I'm not equal, I'm not worthy. And I think that's where that need to care and overcare for someone, to be seen as a person in general, and just be seen as like, look, I'm here and I'm good. So, all of us.
Thank you. All right, so breaking the cycle. Addressing codependency requires developing healthy boundaries, improving self-esteem, and learning to care for your own emotional needs without relying solely on others. A few daily things you can do to improve your mental well-being are get and stay active in recovery, establish a routine, practice mindfulness, stay connected, set realistic goals. I struggle with setting too high of goals that aren't ever achievable. That's the perfectionist in me. Get enough sleep. I also try to function off of 2 hours or less of sleep at night. Not anymore. Not anymore. I have a very set sleep routine now. Engage in hobbies. Practice self-compassion and seek professional help. So let's go to the recovery side of it. So without recovery, where would I be today? These are all quotes from a CoDA literature book called The Common Threads. It's a great read if you are into reading. But the quote I like the most out of this is, I think I would have continued to be involved in unhealthy and abusive love relationships. Of course, I can't say that for sure. And then also engaging in self-destruction at the hands of people I felt sorry for. I can relate to both of those pretty well. I can relate to all four of these really well. That's why I put them there. But those two specifically, I engage in a lot of self-destructive behaviors at times when I'm in my more depressive states. And it was because I didn't know how to handle the relationships where I was codependent in and struggling to set the boundaries. Even though I knew what I needed to do, I was struggling to actually do it. But since being able to set those boundaries, I was able to stop engaging in those behaviors. And now it's been a couple months. So besides recovery and besides seeking professional help, there are some practical day-to-day things that you can do, and one of which is practicing gratitude. So the jars in front of you are what will become a gratitude jar for you. So it is shown that practicing gratitude can shift your focus to positivity. It reduces your stress. It boosts your resilience. It enhances self-esteem. It improves relationships, and it promotes mindfulness. So here in a minute, I'll let you actually write out on your cards, and you'll get to keep the jars. If you want to decorate them in the creative station, you can, or you can take it home plain so you can see all those cards pile up. I'm the one that likes to see it all pile up, and then at the end of the year, at the end of the month, however many you do, you just go through them and read them and just see what you're grateful for. I know some people have recently done the most recent STEP study statewide, and they started practicing where we were sending 3 gratitudes a day. And that just, it shifts that focus to the positive things. Even if it's hard to shift to see something, when you're in a really low spot, just finding something positive a day will boost it in the end. And that's what I have to do when I'm in my really low spots. Even if it's just one thing a day, I have to find something that I'm grateful for. And in the end, I'll get back to my 3 a day or 5 a day. But that is a practical and easy way. And if you're not one to writing notes and sticking them in a jar, just saying them out loud or writing them in a journal, sticking them on sticky notes and putting them on your mirror. Sometimes I do that. I'm a very visual person. So whatever you need to do, that's a very practical and simple thing, and it can become in your daily routine, and you do it without even thinking. And then the day that you may miss it, you're like, oh, something doesn't feel right. And then you go back and do it, and you feel better. So I've got, actually, let me go back. So going back to the very first slide of my little mental health timeline before CoDA, I had shared that I had 9 different hospital inpatient and residential treatment stays in under a 2-year time span. I was never home for more than about 3 months. It was usually only about a month or a month and a half. And actually, to this date, it has now been almost 13 months since I was in the hospital. And that was in August of last year. And 2 years and 3 months since my last suicide attempt. So, all this to say, there is hope. I do think that CoDA has played a big role in my mental health recovery, along with the other practical things, and the practicing gratitude and seeking mental professional help. And to close, I just want to leave you with one quote. Without recovery, the cycle of shame, fear, and low self-esteem often continues into the next generation unchanged. At worst, we could have self-destructed. Codependency can range from despair and depression to hostility and rage. Untreated, codependents can end up hurting themselves or others. And that also comes from the common threads. You can find it on page 13. So again, feel free to take those jars with you. There's color pages on the tables, and thank you for your time.